Hey all, welcome back to Room 66. We appreciate all of our new subscribers who have decided to stay with us. It really helps us out and we appreciate each one of you. Tonight's stories are a compilation of true stalker stories sent in by our wonderful subscribers. So let's begin. I live in Germany, and around 2 months ago, there was a big anime convention. I went there with my friend who had 2 other friends, which live in another city. Stay at her place for the weekend for the convention. To get home from the convention, my friends would have to take the same way as me, and only get off the tram a few stops later. We were all in cosplay, and I only wore a thin 1-layer yukata, and since it was only March, it was also still pretty cold in the evening. On the last day, the 4 of us stayed until the convention closed, took pictures until it became dark, and then made our way home. So at one point, we had to change tram lines and waited at the station. I, only wearing the yukata, started getting cold and shaking. So the 3 of them and 2 other nice ladies gathered around me. Yes, like penguins. And one of my friends started rubbing my arm to keep me at least a bit warm. A man who was also waiting at the station saw this and started walking over to us. He seemed a bit drunk, not only because of the bottle of wine in his hand, which he took a sip out of every now and then, but he didn't appear to be harmful. He looked Middle Eastern and talked either drunken gibberish or a language we didn't know. So my friend asked him if he needed anything, but he didn't answer, so apparently he couldn't understand us as well. Then he noticed her rubbing my arm and started petting my arm as if I were a cat. I, who is very shy and has no social skills whatsoever, was so perplexed that I didn't even do anything but started feeling really uncomfortable. My friends and the 2 ladies, who also didn't like the situation, Penguin Group walked me to a part of the station where another lady was standing, and she noticed the situation, asked if we were okay. We said we were, even though he had followed us. We were not sure if he was planning on following us any further, so we made a plan. There were 2 tram lines that we could take, which would take us home. Our plan was to pretend to get off on the first tram coming, and see if he followed. If he did, we wouldn't get on, and instead take the other line that would just come a few minutes later. And so we went on with our plan, and the result was just as we expected. He got on the first tram, saw that we didn't, got off, and got on the other tram that we actually got onto. He sat in the seat right next to us and looked and acted like nothing happened. Then one of my friends told him that she would call the police if he didn't leave us alone, and he actually offered her his cell phone. This guy must have been so drunk. This went on for a few minutes until we reached my stop, and my friends decided they wouldn't let me go home alone, and I'm so glad that they didn't. As soon as we got off, the creep stood up and followed us. But we weren't finished with our plan. Just down the street was a police station, and we didn't want that guy to know where I lived, so we decided to go to the police and report him. I mean, surely he wouldn't follow us there, right? Wrong. We walked down the street and into the station, and he just walked in behind us as if he didn't do anything. We went up to the officer, who must have thought that this was some kind of joke. 4 young girls in cosplay, with crazy makeup, telling him that the guy who just casually walked in after them was stalking them. After a moment, he told us to wait while he got another officer. While he was away, another guy walked into the waiting room and was met with the same strange scene. 4 crazy-looking girls, one of them me, holding a huge plushie which I had bought earlier that day, and a drunk dude. After what seemed like an eternity of awkward silence, 2 more police officers showed up, and my friend explained the situation to them. After listening, they told us we could go home and that they would handle the situation. We were so glad that nothing had happened. I wanted to share a story of when I was 18. I was working at my first job ever as a cashier. I had been there almost 6 months and was really hoping for a promotion sometime soon. We were a resale shop, so as long as I had another cashier working, I helped out my other coworkers with stocking and cleaning. When I was on the floor, a customer approached me. Nothing odd at first, usually people ask for help. That's what I'm here for. He comes up and goes, Hi, Jennifer. Not my real name, but thought I'd put it there. Hi, how can I help you? Do you remember me? I bought those cups last week. No, I didn't actually remember him, but I wanted to be polite, and silly me thought he was just an old man. What's the worst he could do? Sure. I hope you're enjoying them. Is there anything you're trying to find? He shakes his head no, and just kind of stands there. Okay, well, if you need anything, let me know. So I start to walk away, but he starts walking behind me. Not like far either. He was so close I could feel his body heat. After a minute, I turned and said, "Are you sure there isn't something you need?" He pulls out a little slip of paper that looks like it fit inside a fortune cookie and sets it on the shelf and slides it to me. "Do you have a boyfriend?" Surprised and shocked, I said no. I had a girlfriend, but didn't think to say it because of how surprised I was. "Well, let me take you fishing sometime." And the paper had his name, Kevin, on it, alongside his phone number. "Take it," he said. So I did, and ran into the employee back of the store and told my manager immediately. We concluded that he probably wouldn't come back because I wasn't going to call him. But we were wrong. He came back and tried to give me his phone number multiple times. Each time I saw him, I spoke to him less and less, or went into the employees only room. All of my managers were very supportive, except one, who thought I was overreacting whenever I told him about how he kept coming back. Kept asking me out, and kept giving me his number. He would say stuff like he's a regular, or he just wants his senior discounts. Despite the fact that he would only bust his stuff at my register, I came off my lunch break once, and he had just finished being checked out and was almost at the door, and he saw me. We had a line wrapping around the store, and he stood next to my register for an hour, staring at me until all of the customers went away. He stood there and pulled out his number yet again. I was so stressed, I just screamed, "Stop giving me your number. You're too old to be doing this." I broke down, and he ran out of the store. I was tired of him waiting, always asking. He had started going into the employees-only parts of the store, and my coworkers, who closed, said that he had waited for me more than once in the parking lot and wrote down his plate numbers. After I screamed and broke down, I thought he finally went away. He had shown up every day for 2 weeks before then. But when I had screamed, he stopped coming by for 1 week. The night he came back, my heart sunk into my chest. He came up with items to buy. "I gave you some space." I noticed. After some silence, he pulls out his wallet. "Are you sure you don't want to go out with me?" "Yes." So he took his wallet out of his back pocket. He then paused and said he wanted to buy something else. So I rang it up, and this time he pulls out a pocket knife and sets it on the counter. With his hand on it, he glares and he says, "Now, are you sure you don't want to go out with me?" Scared, I take a step back and go, "Yeah, I'm sure." He sighed and pulled out his wallet, paid, put it away, and the knife, then stomped out of the store. I had a complete and total panic attack. During the confrontation, a coworker who saw but didn't like me pointed and laughed when I mouthed help. I stormed back there and screamed, "He had a knife! He had a knife!" I had to get calmed down as I yelled at her about how I could have seriously been hurt. I turned to my manager and told him about what just happened, and then as soon as I got off, I called my mom and went straight to the sheriff's station. We filed a report about what happened that night and everything leading up to it. After a few days, I found out that they went down to where he lived and gave him a firm warning to stop. I was sad that they didn't arrest him, but he stopped. They had to drive 3 towns over because his current living address was 40 minutes away. He had been making daily trips to see me. Also, his wife was very unhappy to find out about what was going on. That's right, he was married on top of all of it. I ended up quitting shortly after, scared he would come back, but I was happy that it had all finally been taken care of. So, starting from scratch. I work at a grocery store in my local New England city, as of a year and a half now, but recently me and a few other employees have noticed something very odd. there is a man in a black 2015 Jeep Grand Cherokee that sits and watches us while we work from an adjacent parking lot. He positions his vehicle so he can presumably watch us through the large glass windows that span the length of the front of the store. At first we thought he might be a security for the store that he parks in, but we ruled that out early on, as he only sits and watches. He rarely leaves his vehicle, which is running at all times. Well, that is, until the incident the other night, which I witnessed firsthand. I was closing the store the other night, and around 8:30 p.m. I went outside the building to gather the carts in the parking lot. This is when I realized our good old pal in the Jeep had quietly come back to his usual spot in the neighborhood. In the same spot as always with the engine and the lights on. But this time something different happened. And for the first time, I saw him with my own eyes. He opened the driver's side door and walked around to the front of the car. Given the height of the Jeep in proportion to himself, he was probably about 6'3", with a large, club bouncer-esque physique. He wore all black from head to toe, with a black blazer that looked more like a trench coat, as the tail of the jacket went down to his knees. His hair color was hard to decipher from such a distance, as well as the overexposure from the headlights of his Jeep, but it appeared to be dirty blonde in color. After stepping out and walking to the rear right passenger door, which he proceeded to open and lean into, reaching for something inside. And after around 10 seconds, he stepped back from the door and pulled out a large and long black case. I could not tell if the case was fabric or plastic, nor did it have any sloping lines like that of a rifle case. He then walked around the front of the car with the case and stopped, and turned around to face me from where I was half hiding, half standing behind a sign as not to be visible. Yet he saw me. In the dark from a considerable distance, while behind a large sign, this man turned and faced me. I could feel him looking directly at me. Then he turned away and got back in the Jeep with his case and left. And we haven't seen him since. I'm looking for an outside perspective from anyone who has experienced something similar, or advice on how to proceed after a recent spike in activity has me wondering if encounters with the stranger are crossing over from a coincidental run-in into how did you find me territory. Over the past 4 months, I've now had 6 encounters with a man I don't know, aged between 50 and 60, each time making me increasingly uncomfortable. There was also one encounter that happened to a friend of mine that I will detail later to see if it is relevant or not. I wouldn't say I'm scared, but any advice would be appreciated on perhaps how I should seriously look into protecting myself going forward, or if I should quit listening to true crime podcasts. The first time meeting this guy, I was in a local thrift store that I frequent often, approximately 4 months ago. I love going to the thrift store as a way to distress and zone out from school life. And because it's directly beside my gym, I pop in whenever I had a chance. It was around 10 a.m. I was in the checkout line behind this guy. I had seen this person looking at me several times earlier throughout the store, when he turned around to comment on something I was buying. For the record, I'm a 28-year-old female, and the kind of person on most days will happily chat with a stranger. Today was not one of those days. I actually had my headphones on and a podcast going. So first off, when he turned to speak to me, I had to pull them off of my head and ask him to repeat what he said. I remember taking pause because our convo started out normal, but quickly went something like this. Him. Wow, that's a great jacket. It was entirely sequenced and obnoxiously loud. Me. Thanks, it's for a party. Him. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I actually had a German Shepherd that I trained in German about 17 years ago. It was weird because he responded without missing a beat, as if this were relevant and not totally from left field. The inflection in his voice was if he were responding appropriately with a normal sentence, but instead it was a mishmash of sentences that were out of place in context, if you know what I mean. I'm also confident he heard me correctly the first time. The other odd thing was that he was next in line and was completely ignoring the only open cashier, who was only about 4 feet away from him, repeatedly calling him over to her till. He continued on about the dog in German for an awkward amount of time, ignoring the growing line of people behind me while I just kind of, in response. After he turned to pay and leave, I watched as he hung back in the entrance area, where they stow shopping carts, stalling before leaving the building. It actually made me hang back at the till a second longer, pretending to fumble with change in my wallet because I could sense a convo coming on, and I was not in the mood for it. I got to my car and didn't think anything of it afterwards. Thrift stores attract all walks of life. The second encounter was about a week later in the same thrift store. He noticed me from afar and came over in my direction to say hi. I said hello back, but did not engage in conversation. After I left the thrift store, I went to my gym directly beside for a workout. The third encounter was actually the same day as the second, but in a different location about 2 hours later. I was in a grocery store that's located about 300 meters away from the thrift store. I don't often go to this store, but it's in the same area as my gym/thrift store. You know how when you're looking for what you need, you walk along each aisle reading the signs above that describes what's in that aisle? I was doing that, reading the signs looking for what I needed / which aisle to go down, when I spotted freaking buddy guy walking literally parallel to me, but on the opposite side down the aisles looking straight at me. When we made eye contact, he smiled, but this time I didn't smile back and pretended I hadn't recognized him. The fourth encounter was when I started to feel uncomfortable. It was again in the same thrift store. However, this time was much later than when I usually go, around 7 or 8 p.m. I was there looking for a dress to wear to my program formal, and was in the area with the fitting room stalls trying on a few options. I came out of the stall to take a look at myself in a full-length mirror, and was checking myself out, turning around, etc., when I stopped and became aware of a figure that was behind me a ways back. It was honestly like out of a movie. I felt every hair on my back stand up as I locked eyes with the person through my reflection in the mirror, and realized it was him. This time, he was standing a few clothing rack aisles back, about 35 feet away. The area he was standing in was the baby onesies section, and he was mouth open, grinning at me. I quickly changed and scurried to a different area of the store. To clarify, this store is massive. It was pretty creepy, and when I told my sister, she said it would make for a great Dateline special. So up until that point, I thought that sure, it might have been strange behavior, but when thinking things over rationally, I had only seen this guy 4 times over the span of 2 months at that point, in an approximately 800-meter radius, which I frequent often. He had made contact only 2 out of 4 times, and he hadn't been threatening, so I mostly believe it's probably just a coincidence with a harmless, albeit kind of kooky guy. I wonder if he perhaps is just a little off, but thinks that we're acquaintances or something, and in the future requires direct and explicit refusal of interest. The recent event that has me reconsidering was actually what happened to a friend of mine, Lisa, and her boyfriend Braden. Lisa and I met earlier this school year, and the only reason I'm considering this as potentially relevant is the fact that we actually look quite similar. So much that the running joke of all of our friends in our program is that we're twins. I actually do have a twin, so she and I joke that she's my surrogate twin while I'm away at school. We're the same height, same hair color, and style. And while I actually don't think she and I look that similar in the face, it's the same particular glasses that she and I both wear daily, which is what really had people mixing us up for the first bit. After the fourth encounter, I mentioned to Lisa about seeing this guy, and gave her a description, and I asked if she thought it was weird. We both agreed and it was kind of creepy, but more than likely just a coincidence. It was last Monday when Lisa and her boyfriend Braden stopped into a grocery store, different than the other one that I had been to before. This is actually the grocery store that I frequent most often, as I have points at a membership there. Lisa was running into the store while Brayden stayed in the car, and it was Brayden who, unaware of the story or the guy, witnessed something he had found strange. As Lisa neared the entrance of the store, Brayden spotted a man nearby notice her, and as he describes, dart between cars to catch up to her. Lisa, unaware of anything, picked up the few items she needed and was in line to pay when she heard a "hey" from behind her, and turned around to see an older man standing facing her empty-handed. He stumbled with his words and then asked where he could find the ice cream. As Lisa returned to the car, Brayden watched the man exit shortly after her and watch her as she made her way towards the car, where his eyes eventually met with Brayden's. Brayden thought this was peculiar and actually made note of a description of the guy. When he shared this with Lisa, and she confirmed that the man had approached her, she immediately thought of the man that I had told her about earlier. She texted me to ask for a description and confirmed that she was almost positive that it was the same person. The 5th. It was 2 days later when I again revisited the thrift store. By now, I know some of you are probably thinking, okay lady, maybe just cool it on the thrift store, if you're so concerned. But I love it, and I also source clothes to rework and sell as a side income. I went earlier than normal, about half an hour after opening, and an hour and a half earlier than when I would usually go. This time, the thought of seeing him was at the forefront of my mind, as I scanned both the parking lot and the store as I entered. There was no sign of him for about 10 or 15 minutes, as I made my way around, looking over my shoulder and at the entrance every so often. To clarify, the store is huge. Most of the aisles I've been describing are just racks of clothes about 4 feet high, and allow for mostly an unobscured view of the store. Along the left side of the store are rows of 7-foot-tall shelves holding knickknacks. All the way to the further back, the shoe section, and behind that, the fitting room stalls at the back of the store. I was looking at the shoes in the only part where I wouldn't have a clear view of what was behind me. I honestly couldn't believe it when the moment I let my guard down, I heard, "Hey!" from behind my right shoulder. Spoiler alert, it was him. He continued walking around to the aisle in front of me, which was back side of the shelving unit I was looking at, and looked at me through the horizontal slates between the shelves and the shoes were on. I didn't respond. I briskly walked in another direction and zigzagged my way to the front of the store. I looked back to see him standing at the head of a different aisle of clothing racks, scanning the store. I did a full circle of the store and watched as he put on a hat he was carrying and exited without purchasing anything. Instead of heading straight ahead to the parking lot, he turned left. The 6th. 2 days after that, I made plans to return to the thrift store again at a different time than usual. I told myself that if I saw this person again, then this was really an indicator of something strange. By now, thoughts began to circle my head if this person perhaps know what car I drive, and has visual of when I might be entering the store. About 15 minutes later, I saw him walk in. Because I saw him first, I was able to watch him from the entrance to the exit. He entered the store, walked directly to the location he had last approached me, made a right turn to walk to the perimeter of the back of the store, scanning down each aisle as he walked, not at the items. I must have looked crazy because I was literally cat and mousing my way around this guy, dipping behind racks and poles to remain out of sight while keeping my eye on him. He again put on a hat and exited the store without purchasing anything. He again took a left turn once outside the building. So there you have it. I've had 6 encounters with this stranger at 2 different locations, at varying times of the day, 3 of which he has made contact, 2 of which have been eye contact from afar, 1 where I think I saw him before he saw me. So should I just brush this off that perhaps we just have the same interests and similar schedules? Am I so paranoid that I'm the one stalking this dude now? Or is this weird? And is this a cause for a heightened level of self-security? The only reason I would be concerned is that I actually live about 2 minutes away from the thrift store. My concern would be that if he were to know what my car looked like, it wouldn't be a long journey away to figure out where I live as I park outside of my house on the street. So tell me, what do you think?